Today, the Husman bros are doing house calls, and we are in a house with a race car on the wall.
This thing is full of stuff that you have probably never seen before in person. I know because I've never seen it before in person.
That's right. Before we go too much further, for continued access to places like this, please subscribe. And now let's get started. Aaron, why don't you kick it off with this incredible motorcycle?
Yeah, I mean, we're standing in a place where there's nothing, which is very rare for this garage because there is something everywhere. But there'll be something here later. Keep watching for that. But we're going to start off with this vintage Harley. This thing is super cool. A 1926 Harley motorcycle. You could see the patina on it. I love this patina on here. You would think a bike like this probably doesn't run, but it absolutely does. Everything in here absolutely runs. But Don wanted to bring this bike back, but leave the patina. This thing did hill climbs. This is an old Harley race bike. This is the kind of stuff they used to race. You can see it's got the jockey shift here. Man, I couldn't even imagine trying to do a jockey shift and run a race, things like the Omaha hill climb, just different types of dirt races, hill climbs that this bike used to be doing. So we got this killer looking 1926 Harley, but this is not the only patinaed thing in this garage. Let's kick it over to Justin, who's gonna show you something really cool and vintage.
That's right, Aaron. I am in patina pocket over here. This is a 1975 Honda built for Chris Jacobs by Holiday. Don now owns it. Funny thing about Don is he actually has people to ride his bikes for him. He's not super into it. Now, when we get over here, we have a really interesting bike. So this is a 1911 Indian. This has always been a Dallas area bike. The story with this bike is that in the 1940s, if you had too many cars or too many vehicles, the government would come take away what you didn't need for scrap metal for the war effort. So the family that owned this bike from new actually hid it on their farm out in Mesquite and hid it from the scrap man, so it exists, because they had to hide it. And Don is basically the second owner of this motorcycle. I want to stress that everything in this garage runs. Now, I asked Don, has he ridden this? I made a joke about him having people ride his bikes for him, but that's really the case. You start this bike up like an old moped and you get pedal started, then you shift it and get it moving, and it's an all four limbs project to ride this bike. Now, Don is a Porsche guy, and this one is the first thing that you see. The cars in this garage are covered with stickers, and this one is covered with flecked paint and just the raw appeal of this vintage body. Now, this is a 1960 car. Even though it's a 1960 car, according to the VIN number, according to the manufacturing date, what this was Porsche using up all of the old parts of the 59. So this car is probably more 59 than it is 60. Nowadays, Porsche calls that a special edition, and you pay a lot more money for it. Here, it was just a way to clear out the shelves. Now, this car, everything works on this car. Everything on this car drives like new. The only patinaed thing on this car is the body. Everything else is as new, and it drives that way. Right next to it here, we have another similar car. Now, this one is a 1962, and this is an Outlaw. We saw an Outlaw at Jack's Garage, and as we've said before, an Outlaw 356 is one that you build for you. This one is a fairly simple build. The blacked out bits I really like on it. The blacked out hood trim here and the Nerf bumpers on it, I think make it a really nice car and a really cool touch. This is a beautiful color, a beautiful car, and I'm sure a lot of fun to drive. Don says he has to keep this car, not just because it's beautiful and a lot of fun, because his daughter got married in it. Now, I don't know how they fit a preacher and a husband and a bride all in this little bitty car, but hey, maybe they're small folks. Aaron, what do you have to talk about?
Me?
Yeah.
I got an origin story.
Okay, I'm interested in that.
Well, this is where it all started. This is where the obsession started. This is Don's first Porsche. Here we have Don's 1971 911E. This thing is really clean. It's been fully restored, gone through. He got it back in the 90s, paid about $5,000 for it, and he's just customized it and just built it exactly the way he wants it. He's taking it on some fun drives. This is not a race car for him, but it's a really, really cool looking car. Great touches on this car, like the Porsche emblem, like the yellow driving lights on the front of it. It's got some really basic black steel wheels, which I think just adds to the cool, rugged nature of this car. But it's just this right balance of clean and rugged. On the back end, you got the big spoiler, but all the badges are gone. This thing is totally clean. Really dark gray color, just a super cool vintage Porsche. And over here in the corner, we got some art. This place is covered in art. Don's got fantastic taste when it comes to automobilia, and so we got some cool racing Porsches over here. We've got the vintage signs on the wall, race shirts over here, we got racing suits over here, we got some vintage racing helmets over here, and much like Don's office, we have a flat surface and we have a model on top of it. Now, while most of us can just dream of having a model of a race car this cool, Don not only has that, but he also has a real vintage race car. You saw this in bits and pieces over at the other garage, but here it is in all of its glory, the 1966 906 race car. Such a cool car. This thing has a huge tub in it. I mean, you just get down almost 12 inches into the cockpit here, and I don't know exactly what the measurement is, but I can't imagine that the bottom of that seat is much more than a couple of inches off the ground. Just such a cool car. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you how it drives because Don will not let us drive it. But while he doesn't let us drive it, he does drive it, and not just in races. This car is going to race at Rennsport next year, but it's got a license plate on it. He drives this thing around. And I can tell you, for being someone who is driving just in the lane next to him, that is an experience by itself. He tells me it is a hell of an experience to drive this thing out on the streets. It's a lot of fun. Justin, what kind of race car you got?
A real race car. I know they're all real, right? So this is Don's latest race car. This was built for the Panamera race. Don races this race every year. In the other garage, you saw the wrecked Porsche hanging off the wall. That was where he wrecked this. Now, every car in this race has to be 1971 or earlier, so this is what's called a backdated car. This is actually a 1974 body. Everybody looks for the 74 because it's a little bit wider, gives you a little bit wider track. It's got modern bits on it, it's got Boxster brakes, it's got a 3.8 motor in it, so this is one hell of a race car, and I'm sure a ton of fun. Also licensed, also drivable on the street. This place is Porsche heavy, as we've seen. Now, there is another car, a familiar face, that we'll check out next. I'm going to toss it over to Aaron so he can talk about the
Alpine Renault. I'm sure you recognize this. You saw this in the other garage, but wait, you did not see this car in the other garage because this is not the Alpine Renault from the last video. This is a nearly identical Alpine Renault that Don has here. Don really just loves the look of this car, so why buy one when you can have two? Really cool car, really small car. I stand next to this thing and I feel like a giant. I just tower over it. But it's a very small car. Not the greatest race car though, because of the way that it's geared. In the straightaways, it only gets up to maybe 105 miles an hour, which to some may seem really fast, but it doesn't seem nearly fast enough when you've got something like this. Here we have another Carrera Panamericana car. This is another 74, been backdated to 73. This is actually also on its way out because it's also not fast enough for Don, really. He's got another car that's got a bigger engine, bigger brakes, and it's going to serve his needs a lot better. So if this looks like something you might want, pay attention because you might see it up for auction here very soon.
All right, we're back to motorcycles now, and this is Don's 1929 Indian flat tracker. Indian has come back a couple times, but this is a true Indian built in the 20s by Americans, by the people that founded the company. You rarely see old Indians like this around. This is super duper cool. I love this motorcycle. One of my favorite parts of this is if you look here at the shift knob, you've got the great Indian in the shift knob here. Neat to see this bike. Now, we come over here, and I think that if you look at this car for a minute without me saying anything, you'll see that Don is not a traditionalist at all. So this is a 911 Turbo, 79. He's got 934 flares on it. He has this big wing because, when you've got a wing, why not have a big wing? And then when you open it up, this thing is a monster. Don calls it his Widowmaker, says, I've always wanted a Widowmaker. And this is certainly a Widowmaker, big turbo, big car. If you've noticed a theme in this garage, it's that Don is not super interested in a nut and bolt factory restoration. This is a hot rod, nothing more than that, but it's a really great looking hot rod, and I love a car with big flares on it. So we're gonna stay in hot rod corner here for a second and come over to this car. So this car, I'm gonna let you soak it in because it's something special again. So this is a 993 with a 964 motor in it with a 73 body kit on it. Another hot rod, and this one was built to be an everyday driver type car. It is fun to build a Porsche the way you want it, whether you're buying one at the factory and you're checking the boxes, or you're putting together what you think is the best of every Porsche in a car like this that you can drive. I love this car. The interior is fantastic. I just love a white Porsche, and I think that if I had the resources, I would probably ask Don the parts I need to buy to put one of these together. So these are the only two cars in the garage that aren't really official race cars. They're just Don's hot rod. Now, I'm in hot rod corner. I'm gonna toss it over to Aaron, who I think we could call where you're at race car corner.
I don't know what else you would call this. This has got to be race car corner because I am surrounded by race cars. I'll start up here at the top with the 1966 Ford Mustang Hertz Rent-A-Racer. Back in the 60s, if you don't know, you could go to Hertz and you could rent a Mustang GT 350. And you could certainly go race it. Now this one in particular has been modified. It is more race car than the kind of rental cars you would get at Hertz back in the 60s. This one was converted into a race car back in the 80s, restored, it ran races, and Don picked it up a couple of years ago. He doesn't race much in it, he just drives it on the streets. Down below that is what he does race in. So this is a LMPT2, Le Mans Prototype 2. This is a race car. It is a vintage car. It's run the Le Mans. It's run the Daytona 24-hour. It's run Sebring. So Don has run or will run COTA with this very soon. We also have some art in the garages. These garages are great for art. Don's got more of it over here. More vintage signs, pictures of vintage races. Like I said, we are in race car corner, and the art really matches that title. None more so than the actual race car bolted to the wall. Now, in any kind of garage, you're going to go through a lot of gorilla hooks, and Don is no exception. But the car he's got up on the wall has a really, really special story. Some of you remember the F1 driver, Alexander Zanardi, and he had a terrible accident. He ended up losing his legs. Well, he was about 13 laps from finishing that race, and so a car was built for him to be able to finish that race that had gas and brake with hand power. Well, they made two of them, a car and a backup car, and that is one of those cars. I was kidding about the gorilla hooks. It's really put up there in a far better way. I will spoil it for you. There's no engine in it. That's what makes it a little bit lighter and easier to bolt to the wall. And as you would imagine, that is the only car in this garage that does not run. So that's a little bit about the cars. Justin, what do we have for entertainment around here?
Well, I mean, if you have a garage, you are going to end up hanging out with your buddies, and you probably should have a race car simulator, and that's what Don has over here in the corner. This is by alracingsims.com. Maybe it's Al Racing Sims, maybe that's his name, Al Sims, I don't know. But either way, this is an interesting simulator. One of the nicest ones I've seen. 3 screens, set up to race. I'm sure it has all the tracks that Don's going to be racing on it. You can buy tracks, you can buy programs that show most of the tracks that you'll be racing on so you can practice. We're actually going to build a sim here soon, so it's nice to see this, and I can't wait until we put that together and give it away to a listener. There's also a sitting area here. If you have a garage, you have buddies that want to come over and hang out, and you've got a flat surface with a race car on it, and that flat surface is a motor table. So the big question that everybody always has is, how do we get to here? Not how did we drive here, but how do you end up with a collection like this? And I'm gonna sit down with Don and see if he's got any insights to help you folks build a collection like this. Don, I wanna thank you again for having us out to both garages. It's been fantastic. We have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
So you have a pretty heavily curated collection here. It's race car heavy. You've told me that this is what you're after. Is there a dream car that you don't have yet that you'd like to add?
You know, I think I keep an eye out for something that could still be competitive. I still race in a pro circuit, but I know my days are numbered and they're coming quickly to an end. So I'm thinking something that still goes fast, that's fun, maybe Porsche. So keeping it out maybe for a 962.
Okay.
That I can do some races and still go fast.
Okay, very nice. So the other big question that everybody has when we do these videos is, how did they get here? What's the secret? I know that you're a self-made man, right? You started from, you said your father's a mailman.
Correct.
So how did you get here? What was your secret?
You know, I think that's a challenge, and obviously that question gets answered different by everybody out there. For me, I think the hardest thing to see with young people today, to trying to get them to realize, is that for most part, it just doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it takes years or decades. I think people forget, or I even forget, you know, in my 20s, falling asleep at the office at 3 a.m. because I'm still doing paperwork, you know, and putting in the hours and the time. It's hard or very rare to have it happen overnight.
Right. There's no lottery
Yeah.
win. So is there any car that you regret getting rid of?
You know, I think in the other garage, we had looked at that 67S R. I had got rid of it and was able years later to buy it back. So I was very thankful for that. But as you can see, probably I should get rid of some cars. And I haven't got rid of enough. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Don, for having us out. I really appreciate the time and really appreciate you sharing your awesome collection with us.
Thanks for coming by.
All right, so while we were filming, a little bit of company showed up. Clint from Texas Street Rods brought over this beautiful 72 Bronco that just got done. Right. Tell us about this. What'd you do to this truck?
So obviously we did a full paint job. We clearanced out the fenders so we could get our 37 Toyos on there. We've got custom Rhino wheels that have been machined to fit on the 72. We did a full frame-off restoration on this. It's fuel injected, Gen 3 5.0 Coyote. Everything is powder coated, custom roll cage, custom recovery stuff, all new gauges, new seats, all the neat stuff, hydro boost brakes so that we had clearance.
What transmission did you go with?
6R80 Ford, 6-speed. We've been working on finalizing tunes and tuning the transmission and just trying to get it right. We have our final dyno day on Friday, so we're just trying to get it all dialed in.
So this thing will really get it.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's pretty capable off-road.
Yeah.
We've been up a mountain, back down a mountain. We put it through its paces out in Red Sands, so that was pretty good.
You always got to have test and tuning on your
absolutely,
build.
Absolutely.
That's the best part of the build.
Part of it.
Yeah.
We've got the twin sticks for the transfer case, so that you don't have to be an all-time four-wheel drive. It's got a standalone transmission controller in it, so you can actually change you can put it in a tow, you can put it in 4-low, you can put it in there, and everything corresponds correctly with that. So it's been an interesting build. It was a bit of a learning curve with clearances and things of that nature, but we got it down, and this one is actually really nice.
Well, it looks fantastic. Did a great job on it. Glad you were able to bring it by while we were here.
Yeah, awesome. Glad to be a part of it.
So that wraps it up for this collection. Let us know which one was your favorite.
Absolutely. Subscribe to see more garages like this. And if you have an awesome garage that's worth us checking out, let us know. Come back and see us next time.